I want to discuss two things that happened with the Ark of the Covenant and add my 2 cents to the issues. And they both involve Israelites dying. And I think most people look at this the first time and say, well, that's not fair. What they do? So let's go over it. The first example is going to be the man who reached out to steady the Ark of the Covenant to keep it from falling. And the first thing you think of is, that's a good thing, isn't it? Well, I mean, yeah, I understand maybe he's not supposed to touch it because it is holy, but which is worse, to allow it to fall? But the key to that is in the verse itself. And what it says, it's in 2 Samuel 6, in verse 6, and they came to as far as the threshing floor of Nachor, and Ozrah reached out forth his hand to the ark of the God to keep it steady, and took hold of it, for the ox shook it out of its place. And the Lord was angry with Ozrah, and God smote him there, and he died there by the ark of the Lord before God. And you're thinking, 1 minute now, why is God angry at him? Would it have been better to let it hit the ground? And the answer to that is actually much easier. Shouldn't have been there at all. Specifically, why is an ox and a wagon hauling the Ark of the Covenant? Because that's not allowed. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't wipe out the people who decided they're going to put it on the wagon to begin with. That is not how the Ark is carried. So let's go through and look at that. We have it first when it discusses the Ark, Exodus 25:14, insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the Ark to carry it. It's not put on something, it is carried by people, the Cohenites specifically. So let's look at Numbers 4 and 5. When the camp is to move, Aaron and his sons are to go in and take down the shielding curtain and put it over the Ark of the Covenant. And I'll explain why that's so important here in a minute. But Numbers 4:15, after Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings, and there's a description to each of the holy furnishings how they have to cover it. They're putting it in fine leather or blue fabric. There's a different description for every holy item. Okay? But before the Cohenites can go in there and touch anything or try to pick it up, Aaron and his sons, which are the priests, have to go in and cover everything first, because nobody's allowed to see this stuff. And I'll show the verse in a minute. And when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Cohenites to come and do the carrying. They must not touch the holy things or they will die. The Cohenites are to carry those things that are in the tent of meeting. So they can't touch the item, but they, obviously they can pick up the wood that goes through the Ark of the Covenant and lift it that way. There's a method that they have to cover each of the holy things. Wagons and oxen were provided for the other Levites to move the things related to the tabernacle, the curtain, the tent. Those went on wagons. All of the wood, the post and everything, those went on wagons with oxen pulling them. But not the holy things. The holy things were never put on a wagon with a cow or an ox pulling them. They were carried by people. So what happened in the time of David? They basically said, we're not too worried about the fact that God said a Cohenite is the only one who's allowed to carry this. And they said, we'll do it our own way. Well, I'm actually surprised only one person died at that point. It said God was angry. Why was he angry? Because they weren't listening to the Torah. Clear as bell on that, okay? Now, Numbers 4:20. The Cohenites must not go in to look at the holy things, even for a moment, or they will die. Nobody's to look at these things. That's why the priests have to go in there before and cover everything up, and only after the priests come out to say it's covered up can the Cohenites even go in to get these things. Because they can't look at any of this stuff. Let's assume that your job is to carry the Ark of the Covenant. And the priests have come out to say the Ark of the Covenant is covered. And you start walking in, and the menorah's not been covered yet. And you see that menorah, you're a dead man. Just like that. So they didn't just, the priests knew it was a death sentence with what they did. So they did not treat it lightly. Everything was covered. And only when it was all covered did they call the Cohenites to say, come in and get the items to move it and get out of there. Okay? So that's item number one. Why was God angry with the person who touched the ark to keep it from falling? Because it should have never been on a wagon, and it should have never been being pulled by oxen in the first place. So, item number one. And even if, wow, if he touched the ark, how is he touching the ark in itself anyway? Sounds like, well, I won't get into it whether it was covered or not. It didn't say. I'm not going to get into that. Now, let's look at the next item. Okay? 1 Samuel 6:19. Now, this is when the Philistines had, and chapter 5 is when the Philistines had stolen the Ark of the Covenant, and they had that plague of boils on them, and they said, okay, we can't handle this, give it back. And so they decided, we're going to put it on a wagon, kind of getting where this is coming, with the oxen pulling it, and they put golden mice on the wagon. Don't ask me why. But they basically were putting it back, they were giving gold and everything back, and they took it back to the land of Judah, which is, I assume, the closest tribe to them at the time. And once they saw that those in Israel had possession of the ark, it was in their possession, they then left and said, okay, we got it back to them, it's out of our hands. But the problem is, 1 Samuel 6:19, the sons of Jochanan were not pleased with the men of Bethsamenes, which is wherever it was, it's one of the tribe areas around Judah, because they saw the ark of the Lord. And they went and they smote among them 50,070 men. And the people mourned because the Lord had inflicted on the people a very great plague. Why? Because they looked at the ark. They're not allowed to see it. Doesn't matter if the Philistines are the ones bringing it back. That has to be covered. There's a very specific requirement on it. It is a factor of something that is most holy. You treat it with tremendous respect and reverence. If you're doing that and you see it and it's not your fault, and you kill, because you're going to get killed. It's just like if we sin and we don't know it. It's an unintentional sin, but it doesn't mean it's not a sin. Looking at that is a problem. You're going to die from it. So, how he deals with that on judgment, obviously I don't think they were trying to look at it. And I'm sure they would have been overjoyful to say it's coming home. But, it's not an ordinary object. It's not, that's a holy object. And you treat it with reverence. And people are not allowed to look at it. Again, the Cohenites who carry the thing can't look at it. So why would somebody from the tribe of Judah be able to look at it, other than the Messiah, who gets to look at it? We, however, do not. If you are called in for whatever reason into the Holy of Holies in the new temple in the millennial reign, again, the Messiah's not going to call you in there to kill you. So I'm sure he's got something. I couldn't imagine that you could even get in there. But assuming you could, I'm sure you had to go through a tremendous ritual to get in there. Even if you're called in, I know there's got to be something, because you're not going to go in there wrong, because you are in the most holy and the absolute most holy. So treat it as such and think of it as such. This is not something as we think of it, I can't even think of them. Like, it's the Hope Diamond, for instance. Okay, it's a very rare object. It's just a rock. The ark is something that's touched by God. So totally different. You can see the Hope Diamond just to show up to the Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. and walk in and see it. If it was stolen, it was brought back, I'm sure a lot of people would just rejoice and say, wow, let's go see it because it's here. It is not, the Ark is not something you get to go see. Even if it's taken, you don't get to go see it. It is only seen by the priest. Even the Cohenites cannot see it. Even though they're the ones moving it, they can't see it.